Newsnight now on BBC Two with Emily Maitlis.
Tonight, let's get down to business. What does the Boris Johnson plan for Brexit look like, and how would it work?
Right, Laura, there's no single magic bullet, but what there is a wealth of experience, a wealth of solutions, and what's changed now is that there's a real positive energy about getting it done.
We talked to his team. Does it resolve the many questions the country has about his plan, or raise still more? Also tonight, we had the story of a child asylum seeker wrongly identified as an adult. We hear what happened when he was left to fend for himself in Britain's asylum system and the violence he endured.
The older man told me, "What are you doing here? You aren't allowed to stay in this house." One day in the early morning, he kicked my door in. He brought out a knife and he lunged at me, but I managed to avoid it and run away.
Lord Dubs is here to give us his reaction. And she's been at the top of the fashion industry for over 3 decades. We hear from Naomi Campbell on exceptional beauty, the Windrush scandal, and her former Vogue editor, Alexandra Shulman.
I thought it was not gracious of her. Welcome. No, it's wrong. Welcome the new. You look bitter. It makes you look bitter and jealous. You don't want to appear that way. You want to be gracious. You want to align yourself with the new.
Hello, good evening. 3 years ago tonight, the UK voted to leave the EU. The decision taken then has informed practically every moment of our national debate since. And yet, astonishingly, we're no closer to knowing the eventual form that departure will take in 4 months' time. Tonight, we hear from the Tory frontrunner, Boris Johnson, who gave an extended, exclusive interview to the BBC this evening. He was asked to define what his vision of Brexit looked like and, more importantly, how it would actually work. In the interview with Laura Kunsberg, he claims the political landscape has changed both in the UK and in the EU, and believed it was possible to broker a new deal before the end of October. He also claimed he could persuade the EU to resolve the Irish border issue after departure, even though the EU leaders themselves have said this is not possible. Mr Johnson said he didn't believe for a moment that we would end up with no deal. We'll speak to a member of Team Boris, Bernard Jenkin, in a moment. First, though, Elizabeth Glinker has been listening to what Boris Johnson had to say and is with me now. Just talk us through this interview then, Elizabeth.
Yes, Emily. So this is the first interview, the first time we've seen Boris Johnson properly since that hustings in Birmingham at the weekend. He refused to talk about his private life, but he did talk quite a lot about Brexit, specifically how he sees it unfolding. And we can listen now to what he had to say on that.
The important thing is that there should be an agreement that the solution of the border questions, the Irish border, Northern Irish border questions, and all the facilitations that we want to produce to get that done, all those issues need to be tackled on the other side of October the 31st during what's called the implementation period.
But the implementation period, as it stands, is part of the withdrawal agreement.
Of course.
And you've said that you wouldn't sign up to the withdrawal agreement and it's dead.
That's right.
So those two things can't both be true.
No, because you're going to need some kind of agreement, and that's certainly what I'm aiming for, in order, as you rightly say, Laura, to get an implementation period. And I think, actually, that politics has changed so much since March the 29th. And I think on both sides of the channel, there's a really different understanding of what is needed.
So Boris Johnson there really doubling down on this idea of an implementation period, despite the fact there's been quite a lot of criticism of the fact that, of course, the implementation period is part of the withdrawal agreement. As we've heard, he says he's not going to sign up to the withdrawal agreement, and therefore there would be no implementation period, which would make that quite difficult. Although he does say, as we heard there in the clip, that there would need to be some sort of agreement. He didn't actually explain how that agreement would come to pass. But if you look at this and you consider that A, you've got to get the EU to come to the table, which they have repeatedly said they will not do. B, you have to then get it through the House of Commons, which it's doubtful as to whether that would be possible. But even if you conceded both of those two things, if you look at the time we have left, there's actually only 20 parliamentary days available to the House of Commons from the beginning of September to that point when we're due to leave on the 31st of October, so pretty difficult.
He tackled another thorny issue, the whole question of the Irish border and how he would approach that. Let's just have a listen.
There are abundant technical fixes that can be introduced to make sure that you don't have to have checks at the border. That's the crucial thing. And everybody accepts that. There are ways you can check for rules of origin, there are ways you can check for compliance with EU good standards.
They don't exist yet.
Oh, wait. Well, they do,
but
actually.
They don't exist
in very large
yet.
measure, they do.
But
You have trusted trader schemes, you have all sorts of schemes that
But
you
as
can put
one
into place.
big solution to the Irish border question, which, as you suggest, is absolutely at the root of this, there is no solution ready right now.
You're right, Laura, that there's no single magic bullet. But what there is a wealth of experience, a wealth of solutions, and what's changed now is that there's a real positive energy about getting it done.
Where's your evidence for that?
And, well, because I think on both sides of the channel, there's an understanding that we have to come out, but clearly Parliament has voted 3 times against the backstop arrangements.
Well, interesting. Abundant technical fixes is the phrase he used there, and that is referring to maximum facilitation, trusted trader, a lot of this stuff, the technology that we've heard a lot about in the past. But he conceded to Laura again that that in itself is not going to be a magic bullet. It won't work on its own. So as it stands at the moment, we don't actually have a solution to the Northern Ireland border. And over and above positivity, not a lot of detail on how he's going to square that circle.
So to counter that, I suppose, he then said he thought he could get no deal through Parliament if he had to. Let's listen in.
In the real world, the UK government is never going to impose checks or a hard border of any kind in Northern Ireland. That's just number one. Number two, in the real world, the UK government is not going to want to impose tariffs on goods coming into the UK.
But it's not just up to the UK.
That's right. I'm coming
it's
to that
not
point.
just up to the UK.
Of course, that's right, Laura. It's not just up to us. It's up to the other side as well. And there is an element, of course, a very important element of mutuality and cooperation in this. And we will be working with our friends and partners to make sure that we have an outcome that is manifestly in the interests of people, of businesses, communities on both sides of the channel.
And you think you could get that through Parliament? You think you could get a no deal through Parliament?
I do. Well, I do. I mean, you've got to be very clear. I think Parliament now understands that the British people want us to come out and to honour the mandate that they gave us. And I think that MPs on both sides of the House also understand that they will face mortal retribution from the electorate unless we get on and do it.
So very aspirational language there, and the language of friends and partners. Perhaps conceding for the first time, though, that it isn't just down to the UK. He says quite clearly that it will also be up to our friends and partners who will have to work with us. Again, though, no evidence particularly put forward by Mr Johnson as to how he's going to make that happen. And given that this process has been going on for 3 years and people have been working very hard at trying to make that happen, still not too much detail.
Elizabeth, thanks very much. We're going to be speaking to Boris Johnson's team, Bernard Jenkin, in just a second. But let's put some of those thoughts to Dominic Grieve, first of all, Remain supporting Conservative, who backed Rory Stewart for the leadership and has yet to publicly declare who he's supporting. But if we can just pick up with where Elizabeth ended, Dominic, Boris Johnson has said Parliament would be willing to back no deal if they had to. That's where he thinks Parliament is now.
I think he's seriously mistaken about that. No deal is catastrophic for this country, not just about the economic relationship, but about the national security implications of losing access to the shared databases which protect us, and on top of that, for the Union of the United Kingdom. It's an absolute deal breaker as far as I'm concerned, and I think you will find that there are numerous other Conservative members of Parliament who share that view. Of course, if he wishes to renegotiate, it's a matter for him. Whether he can succeed if he becomes Prime Minister is another matter.
You said a deal breaker.
Well, it's a deal breaker in the sense it's the moment when the national interest goes clearly in front of any party political considerations I could possibly have. Yes, totally. A no-deal Brexit is a catastrophe. and I will not go down in history as an MP who's facilitated it.
How many, realistically, do you think are like you in your
I
party?
think there are a substantial number. It's
10,
very difficult.
15?
I think 10, 15, I think without difficulty, and there might be more. It really is. It is an unrealistic proposition. And I worry because throughout this whole of this campaign, there has been a tendency to pretend that this isn't a major issue, that it can be somehow brushed under the carpet. It can't be. It is so damaging to our country and its future that anybody who puts the national interest at the forefront of what they do as a Member of Parliament cannot ignore this.
You're telling me that Conservative MPs will bring down a Conservative government?
If a Prime Minister decides to do something which appears to be completely crazy, which is trying to drag us out with no deal without the approval of the House of Commons, because obviously if the House of Commons chose to approve a no-deal Brexit, it would be another matter, but simply said, well, I've decided that no deal is the thing we're going to do and you're going to have to go along with it, I think you will find, obviously, the first thing people would do is to try to find some way of deflecting this and also preserving the unity of the party. But if it came to the crunch, then I'm afraid at that point the country has to come before party.
Are you sure? Because when Rory Stewart couldn't even bring himself to vote with the Labour amendment against no deal, people thought, well, that's what will happen. They'll bottle it. Nobody in your party wants to let in Jeremy Corbyn.
It's absolutely right. I don't want to let in Jeremy Corbyn. I think it would be a disaster for this country. But it would also be a disaster for this country and likely to lead to a Corbyn government if we carry out a crazy Brexit. And a no-deal Brexit is exactly that.
OK, well, let's move away from no deal because Boris Johnson in that interview said he hopes the EU would be willing to grant a period of time where the status quo is maintained. In other words, for a deal to be finalised after Brexit, during that implementation period. He would look at the knotty issues like the Irish border in that implementation period after we'd actually left.
Well, I think it's very unlikely that the EU will agree to this. I mean, this is a rather different issue. Clearly, he's entitled to go away and negotiate whatever he likes. And I wish him well. And if he can come along with some separate or different deal from the one which the Prime Minister brought back, he should be allowed to do that. And we can then consider what he's produced. But I have to say that I have serious doubts that this is a realistic proposal, because there's never been an indication from the EU that they would be prepared to do this. And it would be a remarkable sea change if they were.
Dominic Grieve, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Joining us now, Bernard Jenkins, supporter of Boris Johnson. There cannot be an implementation period without the withdrawal. You accept that?
Well, if there's a basic interim trade deal struck before the 31st of October, just on goods, which can be done on a few sheets of paper under the GATT Article 24 arrangements with the agreement of the EU. And incidentally, nobody's ever suggested that this would be done without the agreement of the EU.
But
and I noticed the BBC website says Boris Johnson has admitted that it has to be done by agreement. Okay. He's never suggested it wouldn't be done.
You've jumped ahead, so just take us, hold my hand, as it were, step by step. The withdrawal agreement is now defunct. Is that right? It goes out the window.
Well, it's pretty well dead. It's been voted down effectively 5 times, hasn't it? It was held back once, voted down 3 times, and then the Prime Minister tried to bring it forward
So he's not
again.
going to salvage anything from that?
Well,
he's not going to bring...
What he said was there are parts of the withdrawal agreement, like the bits on citizenship, which we can implement unilaterally as a goodwill gesture towards the European Union. We can guarantee the rights of EU citizens in the UK, for example.
OK, so, but broadly, as he said, it's defunct, it's dead, whatever. The money, the 39 billion, he was very vague on that tonight. He talked about creative ambiguity again. Does the money, 39 billion, go to Europe or not if the withdrawal agreement is dead?
Well, I think, speaking personally, I would like to make some of those payments in order to make sure that we get the goodwill. But if the EU is going to sort of put up the barriers, be anti-free trade, not talk about anything...
We haven't even got there yet.
Well, then we probably have the right to withhold the money. But the point is we have the right to withhold the money. Even the House of Lords committee said that we have the right to
we're moving
withhold
step
the
by
money.
step, aren't we?
Okay.
And you've said that the withdrawal agreement is defunct and the EU should somehow come to the table anyway, even though they've said that they're not going to start negotiations at all if the withdrawal agreement isn't signed.
Well, if it is clear that the withdrawal agreement is dead, and it is, the EU has to ask itself what is in its interests, in the interests of its people. And it's actually written down in the EU treaties to be in favour of free trade. They're not meant to be putting up barriers to free trade.
This is what we got from the Irish Senate's Brexit Committee literally half an hour ago. The withdrawal agreement is closed and will not be reopened, OK?
Yeah, well, that's why it's not worth trying to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement.
OK, so you think that even though you haven't yet committed to the 39 billion and you've said the withdrawal agreement is dead, that they're going to somehow come to the table and start talking to you about a future trade?
If we're going to leave the European Union on the 31st of October, do they really want to put tariffs on trade between the UK and the EU? Because it will be rather less to their advantage than to us. We will collect quite a large quantity of money, 13 billion a year or so, on what they sell to us. Well, if they will collect a tiny fraction of that, I don't think the German
want you to sign the deal or to stay in, but as things happen in law, we will go onto WTO rules. That's what happens.
Unless there's an Article 24 agreement between the EU and the UK, in which case we can have an interim free trade agreement leading to a fully comprehensive free trade agreement, which is what Donald Tusk originally promised back in March 18.
Liam Fox said that's absolutely not going to happen. He's been working on this for 3 years and he's a Brexiteer. He said you have to have an agreement to benefit from any temporary relaxation.
Correct.
He knows what he's talking about.
That's exactly what I said.
Right.
There has to be an agreement under Article 24.
So why would they? Just explain this to me.
Well,
why would
because
they
might be
agree?
interested in jobs and employment in Germany and France. They sell us far more stuff than we sell to them, and it will damage them if there are
so they've been absolutely clear. They've been absolutely clear that they're not renegotiating. You haven't even put the 39 billion definitely on the table at this point.
Well, obviously, if what's bad about the withdrawal agreement as it stands is we put 39 billion on the table before we've even started talking about a future trade agreement. And that's a very bad deal.
OK.
So
do you know that the EU is happy to meet you on this GATT arrangement?
Well, it's up to them, isn't it?
No. Do you know, because you're speaking for Boris Johnson tonight, do you know that they are willing and open to agree some kind of interim?
No, of course not.
You don't?
But it's up to them, isn't it? Do they want to bring the shutters down on free trade between the UK and the EU, which would be destructive of their economies, as well, particularly for Ireland, particularly for Germany, particularly for northern France, or actually will they want to talk to us on a reasonable basis, in line with the aspirations of their own treaty, which says in Article 8 they want to have good neighbourly relations and free trade with their neighbouring states. I'm trying to get my head around this because you've had 3 years and Boris Johnson... Well, I haven't had 3 years, actually. I've not been running the government, nor has Boris. Boris resigned from this government.
You, the Brexiteers,
we haven't had a government for 3 years
have had the chance as a Conservative government. You're still a Conservative, aren't you? Right, OK. So Boris Johnson, from the sounds of it, hasn't had those conversations yet with the EU. He doesn't have a deal. He doesn't have the policy. He doesn't have...
Well, I mean, you're saying all these things as assertions.
Well, you tell me. No, I'm just interested because if you've had those conversations with the EU and you know that there is something on which you can pin this hope, then that's fantastic for the whole country. But at the moment, that's all it is. Well, it's a hope.
Well, the EU has been playing very hardball with the British government so far. And on the basis that the British government would crumble, and Theresa May did crumble.
Well, we
and
didn't
that's why
leave
we're
in
that's why we're in a bit of a political crisis
in April,
now.
And so they haven't crumbled at all, have they? They haven't crumbled.
No, but that's why we need a new Prime Minister.
OK, so we'll have a new Prime Minister. Yes. But what makes you think that he will then bring the EU to the table to do the thing that it's consistently said for 3 years it won't do? You are pinning all this on a hope.
Well, I'm not. It's not guaranteed. And if the EU really wants to apply tariffs to trade with, it wants us to apply tariffs on what they sell to us, well, they can choose that course. It's not our choice. We're going to offer them the opportunity for an interim free trade agreement under Article 24 of the GATT treaty. If they don't want that, that really is up to them. We can then cut some of our tariffs unilaterally across the whole. We can reduce some of the costs of imports coming into this country across the board.
You'd accept that we have to go onto WTO rules, which are the same tariff right across the board.
Yes, but we can set our own tariff schedule.
We have to cut tariffs for everyone.
Yes, that's right. And the government has published a draft tariff schedule to show what tariffs we would cut.
That if the EU doesn't agree to your interim GATT, we are on WTO tariffs at the same tariff for everyone. Every deal we do. You accept that?
Well, except for all the countries we've already done we've novated the free trade agreements the EU has with other countries like South Korea, like Switzerland, quite substantial trading partners of ours. But we will have free trade agreements with those people, and we will quickly have a free trade agreement with the United States, because the United States has
again,
made
you don't know
clear.
that either,
Well,
because you certainly
the President has said it. I mean, you asked me, the EU has not said it,
right.
but the President of the United States has said it in terms. Perhaps you don't believe him either.
I just want to understand the policy that you are helping businesses to understand, because you're the Conservative Party, you're the party of business.
In the worst case,
yes.
the EU insists on abandoning free trade and applying tariffs. There will be some of our industries, like agriculture and motors, that will be quite hard hit by the highest tariffs. We will have £39 billion and the income from we're collecting on the goods. So
we're not going to give them any of that 39. No, I just want to understand that money. 39 billion doesn't go to the EU at all.
Well, if they're not giving us any kind of trade deal whatsoever, why should we give them £39 billion?
Okay. So wouldn't it be
But
simpler?
the point is, we will use that money to support the sectors that are hardest hit by the highest tariffs.
I just wonder why you
so
wouldn't say
the
at
sheep
this point,
farmers in Shropshire, for example.
We haven't had those conversations with the EU. We don't know that they'll come to the table. They've repeatedly said they won't reopen the withdrawal agreement. They haven't talked about GATT or Article 24. So at this point, the best thing we can do is accept it's going to be WTO terms, warn our farmers, warn our car industry, create the car parks we need or whatever we do, and just say we will prepare. We'll have that extra money. We will prepare for that no deal, and businesses can get used to it.
And that's what the European Union is doing well. There are 11 extra lanes at Calais for queuing trucks if necessary. They've set up a SPS area. And when you say we've got to warn our farmers, what we need is a government who's going to put in place the programmes to support our farmers, to support the motor industry, to make sure that because we will be quids in, we will be cashing in, not crashing out.
So it should be a great thing then?
Oh, well, the economy will probably grow faster in the first year after we leave the EU, even without a withdrawal agreement.
Is this you or is this Boris Johnson? Because he's just said it's very unlikely we'll leave with no deal, and you sound positively excited about no deal now.
Except that what Boris is determined to do is absolutely flat out prepare for leaving without a withdrawal agreement, because actually that makes it much less likely. If the EU see that we are ready to leave without a withdrawal agreement, and without any agreement at all, if that's what they really, really want, then I think you will begin to see some fragmentation, because it's not what they want. And in fact, in the run-up to the 29th of March, German industry, the head of the German CBI equivalent, was saying, we must have a deal, we must have a deal.
Let's see where we are.
They'll come to the table.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for coming in. Now, for the last 6 months, Newsnight's been investigating the UK's asylum system. We've previously examined how our poorest communities are responsible for housing so many of our asylum seekers. Tonight, the story of what happened to a child who was told he was lying. It's the story of a teenager who fled his homeland for a new life in the UK, but was told by the authorities his claim to be a child was untrue, and that he warranted none of the protections afforded to children. He's one of many identified by Newsnight who've suffered a similar fate, only for the authorities to later accept that in fact it was they who were wrong. This report from producer Jake Morris and our reporter James Clayton.
Asylum seeker lied. The government fucking is stupid. Fucking asylum seekers. Whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. Doesn't matter. We shouldn't blow people fucking up, really. That's the fucking problem. Yeah, Western intervention's always been a bad idea, really. By any stretch of imagination. Anyway. Let's get back to Brexit. There's some things I wanted to talk about, because Brexit's interesting. Asylum seekers not so much, unless you're a racist or some shit and you think, oh, we're getting invaded by non-white people. So there's some things I need to scroll up so I can fucking see these points of view, because someone made a good point. Where is it? It's what? Yeah, send the pendulum to the Falklands. We'd probably lose if we sent them to the fucking Falklands. Useless twats. Yeah, we on a shitty island. I'm just going to say this again. Did any of that make any sense to you guys when it came to a fair... what's the term? A fair outlook of the candidates. It wasn't. It was just Boris Johnson. Boris. And that's because the media likes Boris. They've made him who he is. It reminds me of Donald Trump. In 2017, 18, I can't remember which fucking year it was. I remember, because I still am a big Bernie Sanders fan. But I remember sitting there watching CNN thinking, where's Bernie Sanders? You know, they actually had a stream for about 2 hours of an empty podium of Donald Trump. Just flags. Nobody actually saying shit. And Bernie Sanders was having a rally. I think the biggest rally in New York's history. I think it was at the time. And they literally couldn't be asked to show you Bernie Sanders. They would rather show you an empty podium. And this is how propaganda works. It's the same thing in my room as well. It's sad to see it. And I know people have their own opinions. But it's sad to see people shout Marxism and Jeremy Corbyn's hard left and he's a commie. It's like, it makes me think they're like robots, or literally so uneducated they don't know what Marxism is, or they don't know what communism is really. I mean, to call Jeremy Corbyn a fucking communist is pretty fucking funny, to say the fucking least. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's more Eurosceptic than fucking most conservatives are. I mean, he's best friends with Tony Benn. Let's not get into that. But in terms of this mad cycle and leaving the EU, this whole idea that we're going to crash out, they're words that are meant to scare the bejeebers out of you. We're going to crash out like a car crash, right? We're the 5th biggest economy on the planet. The annual turnover of the United Kingdom is about 2.2 trillion a year, something close to that. There's no way we're going to be ever close to Venezuela. There just isn't. Our financial capital, i.e. London, is the financial capital of the planet. We wash everybody's money. It's 70% of our GDP, I think. We make the rules on how banks operate. Gordon Brown saved the banks from dying, literally dying, in the United Kingdom. And then people tell us we've run out of money. We can't run out of money. We got a central bank. We can print that shit from thin air. How you control that shit's a different story altogether. You need to control inflation, which is why the Bank of England has an inflation target, right? Which is based on how much people earn, how much people spend, and how much goods cost in the shops. Now let's think about this rationally. If the EU want to put tariffs on us for all this amount of money, think about this properly. If we leave the EU with no deal, and the EU puts on tariffs, it would hurt them more than it would hurt us, because we literally don't buy anything. We just don't. We import most of our shit. We could pay in subsidies, literally in subsidies, no jokes, in the amount of tariffs they charge us. We could give it to our farmers, anybody else. We could literally pay for the tariffs and still have change. Still have change to play with. I shit you not. So for all these people who are saying the sky is going to fall down, we're going to crash out the economy, that's bullshit. It's complete nonsense. They tried to do the same thing with the euro. Remember? Does anybody remember that? Well, if we don't join the euro, we're all going to die. The sky's going to fall down if we don't join the euro. Never happened. In fact, we grew quicker than most of the European countries did. I mean, shit, our economy is set to overtake Germany's economy in the next 10 years. We're going to be bigger as a proportion of GDP per population than Germany is in the next 10 years, regardless if we're in the euro or not. Because the slack in our economy is so big. You need to understand why that is. Because the neoliberals took over our country and decimated our manufacturing sector. And if the pound goes down, that's a good idea. Why? Because our multinational corporations that are listed on the FTSE, they don't pay tax in pounds, they pay them in dollars. So the more the pound goes down, the more tax revenue actually the government gets, which seems counterproductive to logic, but that's the way shit works. So for all these people banging on about it's the worst thing for the United Kingdom that we leave the EU, don't understand one, economics, and don't understand two, it's actually more about economics. The EU is an old 1945 idea of how you should economically run shit. right? Free markets. We're past 1945. We're past neoliberalism. We're done with that shit. We're talking about universal basic income, 4-day-a-week working hours. People are going to lose their jobs. How do you pay for elderly care? How does taxation work? The rich are uber rich. All these things didn't apply in 1945 or even 1970s. You know, owning a company and taxing people and then giving it to private corporations doesn't make any sense anymore. It just doesn't. Because people are already rich. You should not and never give companies money that you collect from taxpayers. Ever. That's bullshit. That's basically feeding the fucking rich. So, why is Brexit important? Brexit is important. Now, because you can dial in how you want your country to be. Do you want to be a social democratic country? Do you want to be right of centre? Do you want to be left of centre? I don't believe in the centre anyway. I think the centre is just fascism. But if you want to go either way, you need to get out of the EU. The EU itself is a protectionist, bureaucratic, non-democratic fuckeries. The reason why you've got the rise of the far right and the so-called far left is because of the centrists, because they ignore everybody's ideas, right? They just think, oh no, shut up, we know what's best for you, shut your mouth, go away, little plebs, we are the know-it-alls. This is the problem. The left and the right have been choked so hard by neoliberalism that they seem extreme to most people today, when actually they're not. These old arguments of left and right, they were normal before, well, I would say before World War II, as far as I'm aware, right? Because I did my research. Left and right was quite normal in regards to fiscal points of views and social points of views, right? So they were quite normal. But because the neoliberals came in and sucked the life out of both the left and the right, now if you listen to the media, the left and the right, they're the extremes. Nigel Farage is far right when he isn't. He's just basically a Tory. And Jeremy Corbyn's a fucking commie when actually he's not. He's just on the left. This is how people have been brainwashed by these fucking idiots who literally are running our media companies, and they run them because they're owned by the very people who gain to fucking make the most money by brainwashing your ass. Therein lies the fucking problem. There's not wrong with being on the left, there's not wrong with being on the right, but these people will make you feel ostracized, call you a racist for voting for Brexit even though you're probably not, make you sound like a commie if you want to fund the NHS. You see the point what I'm trying to make here? And these political programs that I stream is the point. I stream these for a reason, to inform you, right? Now, I don't stream them because I want you to be brainwashed, because if you listen to me after the shows, you'll find out exactly why I stream them. I don't stream them just because I want to make fucking money, clearly. I want you guys to understand these people stream these things for a reason. The people who run these, the editors and all these people, they have a political agenda. They want you to think a certain way. Propaganda is like advertisements. Buy our new fucking soapy shit, it'll make your hair look great. You still got hair when you wake up. It doesn't make your hair any better, it's still your same fucking hair. But these fuckers will make you think you're fucking, I don't know, in the Avengers or some shit. It's the same politically. It's pretty weird to say the least. So if you come on my channel, I'm always going to inform you of the truth. I don't bullshit you. I'm not left or right in that regards of telling you the truth. I have my political leaning. I just defended Boris fucking Johnson for fuck's sake, because that was a hit job on Panorama. So I'm just pointing out the fucking obvious here. These people have agendas to make you think a certain way. Neoliberalism is the death of democracy. They are fascist. Anyone who ever watching the TV say the centre, they're neoliberals. They are the death of the left and the right. They want to just shut you both up. You're not allowed to have an opinion. This is where PC culture came from. The fucking middle ground. These fucking social justice warrior cunts, they're neoliberals. That's where they came from. You can't see tits on TV. You're not allowed to appreciate women. You're not allowed to say the word fucking gay. You can't say prick. You can't say anything these days because someone gets fucking offended because they're snowflakes. It's not that they're snowflakes. They've been brainwashed to be snowflakes. This is the point. You're not allowed to be who you are because you need to conform. This is the point, people. You need to conform to these people's brainwashing ideological bullshit. If you think a certain way, oh no, you can't think that way. You're not allowed to, because that's not politically correct. If people say shit in my room, I understand the difference between people having a fucking opinion and people being just dicks. There's a difference there, right? But these fuckers want to brainwash everybody. Not allowed to have an opinion. Can't even tell fucking jokes. Most of the people in my side chat don't know the way I think, so that's a good thing. So, all I'm saying is Brexit's going to be harder than people think. I know people are emotional. I voted to leave. People voted to remain. But at the end of the day is, we as a country need to understand we're being shafted by the very rich people in our society. They want to brainwash us into thinking some other stupid shit, like Little Englander and all the stupid nonsense sound bites. You know, it's fucking ridiculous. I give you a good example, the Scottish. Well, the Scottish couldn't run their own country because they're all a bunch of fucking kilt-wearing, haggis-eating cunts. Maybe so. Doesn't mean they can't run their own country. You get what I'm saying? You gotta understand what democracy is. A group of people trying to form a social construct and a contract where they can agree on how they want their shit to be run. And the United Kingdom, as it is, sadly, decided to do that. And you get all the bitter cunts on one side going, oh no, we want to stay in the EU. That's fine. But then you get all the other people on the other side saying, we want to leave. That's cool. But at the end of the day is, if you have this thing called democracy, which everybody agrees to apparently as the form of how we vote and do shit, then I'm sorry about your luck, but the fucking Leave group won. These idiots in Parliament are supposed to do what we tell them to. Apparently they don't want to, because they put their own self-interest before the country, which is amazing. Literally amazing. To just think that we literally had the biggest vote in our entire history as a fucking island, and for these politicians to not only screw her up, but to royally screw her up is quite mind-boggling. They could have did that on the first day. Nope. Political expedience is the problem. In fact, the reason why we had a referendum is political expedience. The Tories were so scared of UKIP that they thought, well, let's get all the UKIP voters and have a referendum. And that was because David Cameron is not as smart as he thinks, even though he went to Oxford. And his political advisors. We didn't have advisors. Did we have advisors when fucking Churchill went to war with the Nazis? No, but now we've got them. We take them as things. Why would you need an advisor? You'd have to be stupid to have an advisor, I guess. Well, I'm waffling, but I'm enjoying my waffle. I just am. I can't believe that we're in a position right now where we're actually doing this. It's pretty shocking, actually. The level of our parliamentarians is disgraceful. On both sides. I'm going to say this. On both sides, it's disgraceful. Just I don't know what's going to happen next. I think there's some kind of revolution coming, and I don't mean that lightly. I mean, in the Western world, I think the rich are too rich. I think democracy's on its arse in so many ways, and I blame neoliberalism since 1945 for that. I think they've ignored the people, the populations of many countries, and I think they're reaping what they sow. And you know, if you look at the French Revolution and other historical points, I think we're due for a kick up the arse, or someone's going to get a kick up the arse. Either way. A big fucking one. I don't think there's going to be chopping off of heads or anything, but I do think people are going to start electing, I wouldn't say extremists as politicians, but clear views on how the populations of said countries are. I think that's going to be the next decade's historical facts. Like, if you used to look at, like, as an historian, you would say what happened in 20 whatever. It's definitely going to be how the West figured out that left and right actually mattered, and the death of neoliberalism. I should actually make a video called The Death of Neoliberalism, because that's literally what's happening before our eyes. The death of neoliberalism. Hashtag maybe. Maybe. The re-enlightenment of capitalism. Because I think capitalism is, I wouldn't say it's dead, but I would say it needs a realignment. And I don't know how that's going to happen. Maybe the green tech thing or whatever. But either way, it's going to be very interesting to see how humans operate in the next 30 years. You know, so it's going to be pretty interesting in that regards. I don't know. It's bizarre. So, I don't know. We will be back tomorrow. I doubt it will be in the morning though, or whatever. PMQs is on Wednesday, so it was a 12:15 tomorrow. We will be back. Yeah. But I hope you all have a good night, considering it's 12:15, but say good morning, really, to be fair. I've got things to do. And so you probably. But I will be back tomorrow. I wish you all the best. Have a good night. And don't let the centrists bite. Dirty neoliberal fuckers. Oh, by the way, if you don't know what neoliberalism is, I do have another channel called Stizor. If you pop along over there, you will see my video about Marxism and neoliberalism, if you don't know what it is. So the next time you shout commie or Marxist, get educated first, and you'll be far more educated, shall we say. I think the video is like half an hour long or something like that. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow. Cheery pops, and thank you to everybody who watches, likes and subscribes. I do appreciate it, especially for my my peeps who give me donations and patrons and shit. I do appreciate it. It does help me out with beer, clearly. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow. Good night, people.